So we were starting Jo Loves. We were really struggling because no one knew I'd left Jo Malone London. I wanted to create fragrance and build another global brand. That was always in my mind. And Pomelo really she is the matriarch of everything. She is the beginning of a new chapter of my life. And I think I definitely created differently from that moment.
You have been described as an English scent maverick and are responsible for creating some of the world's most beloved fragrances. And you built Jo Malone London from scratch and ended up selling it to the Estée Lauder companies back in 1999. You then ended up exiting the business and starting a new chapter called Jo Loves, your big comeback. To me, your story is beyond inspirational. It is a story of true grit, passion, creativity, but also you lead with your heart, and that really shows. Now, I do want to go back to the very beginning. I want to go back to your childhood. Could you please take us back to a moment in time when you knew or you discovered that your sense of smell was something special, something extraordinary?
One of the great joys in my life is sharing a story of life and adventure and inspiration. So thank you. And I believe that nothing is ever wasted in life. Whoever we are, wherever we come from, everything can eventually come back together. And it's the ingredients of who makes us who we are today. So my childhood was really, I grew up in a very poor background. So there wasn't a lot of money in our house, but a whole heap of inspiration from two parents. And my jobs from the age of 11 years old were to help my father sell his paintings in the markets on a Saturday. He was also part of the magic circle. He was a magician, so I would help him make magic tricks. And I was also the magician's assistant, so I knew how white rabbits came out of hats and all of those things. And I also helped my mum make face creams. So you can see between those three things, there was the upbringing of an entrepreneur from the age of 10, 11 years old. But I thought everyone could smell like I could. So I could smell when my dad was in the back of the garden making his magic trick, of making, I could smell sulfur burning. I could smell if the dog was sick. I could smell when my mum was making face creams. If the almond oil had overheated, I could smell that it had turned and gone. And of course, the cosmetic then wouldn't bind with the waxes. So my sense of smell was almost I often think in another life I was probably a bloodhound or a dog or something. I love the idea of that. My sense of smell has genetically followed me. But I think from a young age, I knew my sense of smell. I loved strange smells. I loved the smell of the oils on the canvas when my dad was painting. And I could tell his temperament if he was wearing Eau Sauvage by Christian Dior, or he was wearing Guerlain by Vetiver. So I associated all of these smells with my mother and father. My mum was Margrife by Carven, and she loved Joy by Joy Patou and Je Reviens by Worth. So I can remember all of those moments as a child through the compass of the power of smell. So I can't ever remember a point at which I haven't been able to smell, and I don't. I see life through the power of smell.
Wonderful. Do you remember that first moment, though, when you realized that people don't smell like you, that you're quite unique? Did somebody maybe tell you something or made an observation where you're like, wow, okay, I am not like everybody else?
I think it was part of me. It's like if your child can suddenly sit down at a piano and play. But I had this incredible ability because I now know, I have dyslexia, and I also have something called synesthesia. So I would see color and be able to smell. And I had no idea that other people couldn't. And I remember one day I was 16 years old in my first job, and a woman walked into the flower shop wearing this beautiful green shirt. And I said to her, "What fragrance are you wearing?" And she said, I'm not wearing fragrance. I can't wear fragrance. And I said, "But your shirt smells of crushed green leaves." And I realized that, and she said, "Does it?" I can't smell it. And I think it was lots of those little moments that made me think, what life takes away with one hand, it'll give you back with another. And yet I struggled telling the time. I struggled telling my left and my right. But I had this incredible ability to use fragrance like this, like a superpower. That's all I can, explain it. And I could smell, it wasn't just about fragrance and cologne and flowers. Although my first job was in a flower shop, that's where I immersed myself. And I would pick up, when I would go to the markets very early in the morning as a young kid, I would ask for, three boxes of tulips, and they would give me the ones that had been in the fridge. So I would pick up the bunch of tulips, smell the stem and say, they're not fresh. And they say, yeah, they are, Jo. And I say, no, they're not. They're not fresh. I can smell it. Where's the fresh ones? And then they were so terrified about ever giving me flowers that had been in the fridge for 2 days that I always got the best flowers, and because I just kind of smell the stem. So it became part of my character, part of my personality, along with taste. So taste and smell, they were my two senses that were really dominant.
This is so fascinating. Going back to scent as a superpower, it's almost like the world was veering you in a certain direction, like telling you, Jo, pay attention, like you're meant to do this because millions of people are going to be happy if you do. But I'm super curious, like when you see, like colors when you smell things, is it always the same color for a similar smell, or are they different every time?
No, it's different every time. I mean, I think that is the magic. I think in the very beginning, Mariya, I think when I saw, it feels the most natural thing in the world for me. So here you can see a Barbie pink cushion. I can smell a rose de mai. I can smell a chili. I can smell a raspberry sorbet. And for some reason, so I'm smelling it as I'm speaking. I can smell a blue patchouli as well. So it's not to do with the color. I'm not associating the color with what we smell. It's just my brain is wired in a different way. But it almost allows me to compose music for my nose. So, that's how I look at it. And I'm able to create a moment with a pink cushion and create the most amazing fragrance from it, along with a story that has integrity and is full of truth. And I think all of those things together make for something magical. But when I look back to the young child who left school at 15, I've got no qualifications. I never went to university. I didn't even go to, I had my first job at 14, 15 years old. I look back and I think I was told I was lazy, I was stupid, I would never make anything of my life. And, I look back on that now and I think, why would someone say that to a child? A child who was clearly struggling with lots of other things. And it shows us in life that the things that we think are disabilities. So I don't believe dyslexia, dyspraxia, any of those spectrum kind of personality traits are a disability. I believe they're the most amazing ability to think differently.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I also want to go back to like the early roots of your entrepreneurial spirit, because so much in what we do in life gets really formed in the very, very early years of our upbringing. So what do you think was it about your childhood that made you an entrepreneur?
And often entrepreneurs are formed through tough circumstances. I had two very creative parents, so I had an appreciation of creativity, but also living with a creative spirit, which is not always as easy as building a business. But from my dad, I would be the one that would go to the markets with him on a Saturday morning. Because there was no money in our house, my mum would say as I walked out the door, if you don't sell a painting today, there is nothing in the fridge. So I was 7, 8 years old when I sold my first painting. And when I think back on that time, and I can remember it as though it were yesterday, I can still remember what I was wearing. I can remember the smell of it was a Greyhound track in Crayford, and I can remember the black soot smell of early winter morning setting up the store and smelling the oil paint on the canvas. I could smell it, and I knew I had 1 hour in order to sell that first painting. Otherwise, the day would be really tedious, and I always did. And the way I did it is I would see someone come towards the stall and start to look at the paintings, and I would start to tell the story of my father painting the painting. And people were so transfixed. So all those years ago, where did I learn the art of selling and telling a story? When I was 7 years old, standing on a greyhound track in the middle of nowhere. Then making face creams with my mum. I learnt, I couldn't read a formulation because of my dyslexia, but I memorized absolutely everything she did, from the spoon that she used to the touch of her finger as something was gelling. I mean, every single thing. And then I was able, within a year, to be the one that was making the face creams. And then, of course, the magic tricks. I learned the art of circus and entertainment, and all of those things that I learned are still with me today. The feeling of when you walk into 42 Elizabeth Street, the feeling of circus being painted with fragrance or exciting you, entertaining you. It's the magician's assistant all over again. If I could chop somebody in half and make the whole experience scented, of course I would as well. It's kind of ingrained within me. So that entrepreneur but that survival instinct. I remember as a young woman once, I must have been 11, 12, and we had no central heating in our house, and we would have a meter that you would put a shilling or 2 shillings in order to get gas and electric. And there was no shillings left. There was absolutely nothing. And I remember standing in my bedroom window, and I was scraping the ice from the window. And I looked out, and I remember thinking, I will not live my adult life like this. I will change something. That determination and that strength and that energy in a young person. And it's funny, Mariya, I see it in this generation. I can see that young Jo in this generation right now, that determination, that sense of entrepreneurialism, survival, all of those things. And I think the next 10 to 20 years are going to be a very exciting time for entrepreneurs.
And I feel like sometimes life is about the promises that we give ourselves. And you gave yourself a promise and you made it really, really happen. Wow, in such a beautiful, fantastic way. I would love to go back to the flower shop, your first job, because what you just mentioned about being able to smell the stems of tulips and know that they're 2 days old is exceptional and extraordinary. Can you just walk us through what that world felt like to you at the time as a little girl? Not a little girl, but a girl, I guess, at that point, working already.
I found the place I belonged because it was full of the sense of smell. And life was to bring me full circle, by the way, back to that. It was more special than I realized at the time. But I was 16 and it was a long, hard day. And it was sort of like 8 a.m. If you were going to the market, you'd have to be up at 5:30 in the market by 6. All the best flowers in Covent, in Nine Elms, are sold then. But Christmas time was amazing, getting the Christmas trees. Everything about it was so exciting for me. I loved the smell of the eucalyptus, and eucalyptus needs to drink the minute you get it back to the flower shop. So you have to bang all the stems so it can drink, and then you plunge it into warm water. And it's almost as though eucalyptus goes, thanks, that was so good. And the smell that it exudes. So what I started to discover is that these scents had voices. They had, not in a crazy way, but, the daisies were kind of pretty and they danced a bit. The roses were kind of matriarchal and, white Norma Jean rose when she opens up and she gives you, so it's very, very sweet. And then you can see when she's ready to just say goodnight, it's over. So all of being around the flowers, I created my own music. I created my own poetry, and the flowers became very much, and the shrubs, they became my family. And I loved the smell of everything. But I was young, and I remember this one particular day where it was a hot summer, really hot summer, and I had probably had not as much sleep as I should have done, and was told that I had to empty the van and put all the flowers out. And I was there, I was watering all the geraniums. And geraniums, have you ever smelt a geranium leaf? It's got a really particular smell. And it can be quite nauseating, actually, after a bit if you're continually smelling them. So I was dipping all these red and white geraniums in a bucket of water. And my manageress came out and she said, it's messy everywhere, Jo. You haven't swept up. You haven't. And I was so placid. And at that moment, something snapped in me. And I picked up the bucket of water that I had been watering the plants, and I tipped it over her. And I couldn't believe what I'd done. There were leaves in her hair. She was so furious, obviously. And she went, you're fired. And I went, I quit. I mean, 16 years old. Can you imagine the precociousness of the whole moment? And that's when I walked up the road to Elizabeth to number 42. And I was put to work at number 42 Elizabeth Street. And at that time, it was a delicatessen.
Yeah, wow. I love that story. I mean, I don't know. I definitely feel the fiery spirit coming up that then made you later in life a successful entrepreneur, in that story of like pouring the bucket of water over someone.
Yeah, not smart.
But I love
not
that.
Smart.
Well, you have to grow up somehow, right?
Well, I think that fiery spirit, I think something really did. For so long, I had been the one who had carried the heavy burdens of our family. And I just think something snapped to me. And from that minute, I felt the taste of freedom and my own voice. Mm-hmm. And it took a few years for me to really find who I was. And it followed. But that was a really life-changing moment. And the man who gave me my job in Elizabeth Street owned both the flower shop and the delicatessen. And I think he saw me and he saw himself in me. And he gave me a chance. I think if I had walked away that day, who knows where I'd be now.
And 42 Elizabeth Street, since we're talking about it, this is the new home for Jo Loves, isn't it?
Yeah, I returned back. I think life has done that to me many times, where I've come full circle and I've returned back to the place in which I've started. And it's almost as though life goes, right now the adventure really begins. I have this constant narrative with life. And pushing for the next dream and I want my life to be full every day, not once a year or once a month, every day. And this particular day was pretty special. So we had recreated Jo Loves, but we were struggling as a business. And it was my birthday. My husband presented me with this small little box, and it wasn't a turquoise box, so I knew it wasn't Tiffany and diamonds. But I did think it was going to be jewelry. And I opened it up and it was a key. And I can't drive because of my dyslexia. I can't to my left, to my right and everything. So I knew it wasn't that. I loved my house. And I realized that it had to be a shop, our first home for Jo Loves. And so I was born on the 5th of November, which is Guy Fawkes night here, which is actually quite apt for me because I'm a bit like a fiery rocket. I'm always, ready to fly in lots of directions. And he said, we're going to go down, grab some bacon sandwiches, cup of coffee, and I'm going to take you to your birthday present. And as I put the key in the door, I knew I'd been there before. And it took me all the way back to that moment with Justin. And I said, I've worked here before. And he said, yes, I know. And we walked in and all of the walls were clad in like this awful kind of dark brown paisley. And it was dark and dingy. But of course, I remembered this bright, amazing studio where creativity lived. And I stood there and I saw the dream in less than a minute. And I've heard life as I walked back into the back studio, which of course where was the kitchens, where the food would come down. I heard life go, you will change the world again in this place and it will start right here. And I felt it, I heard it in my soul. And then I looked at him and I said, we're going to build the world's first fragrance tapas bar. And at that moment, he looked like he was about to divorce me. And he said, you've got to be joking. We're not making a tapas bar. And I went, no, listen, we're going to create the world's first tapas bar for your nose. And I said, that wall there goes back 2 foot. And he said, no, it doesn't. I've got the plans. I went, give me the screwdriver. Drilled a hole in the wall, stuck my finger through. And I went, that is where we'll build the tapas bar. And that is exactly what we did. We built the tapas bar. It was the world's first fragrance tapas bar. But it whenever I walk in that shop, I feel the young girl again. I feel something about the creativity that was left behind and the obligation I have to continue to tell that story. There's a picture in the book of my first boss and me standing in exactly the same position 35 years later.
The concept of a tapas bar as it relates to scent is fascinating.
It's all about the magician. It's all about circus. It's all about all the things that we love and entertainment. So everybody in life remembers their first kiss. I'm sure you do. I do.
Yes.
And mine wasn't too good, I have to say. But so later on in life, I had much better kisses, but my first one wasn't that great. But everyone remembers their first kiss. And in businesses, when you create something, you need to create that first kiss moment. You need to create that moment that you will never forget, the time that you walked through our doorway at Jo Love's in London and we kissed you for the first time with our brand. It's a very engaging, intimate moment. It's free of charge. We don't charge for it. It's as though you've walked into my home and I've said, Mariya, come and sit down. Can I get you a glass of wine? Are you hungry? What would you like to eat? But I'm feeding you with creativity rather than food. Nothing to eat, only to smell. So that first kiss moment, when you come in and you engage with tapas, and we serve 3 to 4 courses of tapas. Your bath cologne comes from a steaming tagine, and we lift the lid, and these wonderful kind of notes of pomelo and grapefruit and orange blossom, neroli, all of these. And there's little balls of cotton wool, and we pick them up with chopsticks and smell. It kind of starts to create this narrative and this story around each product. And then your shower gels, we get cocktail shakers. So one of my favorite titles is the scent Maverick, because I do feel like Tom Cruise. And shaking the cocktail shaker, pouring it into martini glasses and then letting people smell them. And then the best one is the body lotions coming from veloute guns. And we get huge paintbrushes. We swipe them into warm water and then we start to paint your body with fragrance. And that 99.99% of the time translates into a sale. So it is our first kiss. It's the moment at which it's almost, it's the podcast, it's the TV show, it's everything. And then we close the deal. And what I love more than anything, because we don't charge for it, grandchildren will bring their grandparents in and they'll sit on a Saturday morning and they sit there. And there's often 3 generations of a family sitting there enjoying tapas together. And, the grandmother saying, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. It's so beautiful. It's reminded me of the stories as a child and the smells that I enjoyed. So the tapas experience is very human. It's very human. It's very real. It's great business. But pushing that aside, something, we have planted a moment in someone's memory.
I love that. Do you have any tips or tricks for our listeners around scenting their home? Like if thhere starting from scratch, where should they begin?
So candles are what I love candles. And yesterday I went to the shop and got a Pomelo I've got a 2-wick candle, and you don't even have to light it. Just lift the lid off the top of the candle and it starts to throw her scent. If you've had a bath and you've put bath cologne in, let the water just stay. Don't just drain it straight away, because that smell will actually fill a space. So you can just leave the bath water in and just let it kind of move around. I love just bottles of fragrance and spraying sofas and, cushions and the dining table. I don't like too much fragrance if you're eating, because it can play with your taste, but just scent the runner or just scent the napkins with a beautiful, like cornflower lavender cologne, something light, fresh, clean. Masculine colognes are better, and citrus colognes around food as well. So, if your wardrobe, you can take a hanger and just put like kitchen towel, something, spray the kitchen towel, pin it on to the hanger and hang it in your wardrobe, and it will scent your wardrobe. I scent towels with things like lemongrass and eucalyptus. We have a eucalyptus and cedar fragrance. Oh, it smells like everything has been packed in a beautiful French armoire or trunk. and you open it and there's this smell of cedarwood and eucalyptus and clean and fresh. So I love those, and I love mimicking. Oh, another thing, sorry, I'm just thinking as I'm talking. If you have flowers that are not real, scent them. So I have 2 beautiful white rose trees. And in the winter, they bloom all the way through the year, but I scent them. So I scent all the green leaves and twigs with fresh crushed leaves. And then the big white rose I scent with white rose and lemon leaves, and nobody knows they're not real.
Oh, wow. I'm wearing white rose and lemon leaves today in my paintbrush format. I am loving it. I'm obsessed. So yes, a lot, if that could go in my house. And I do have a candle as well. So thank you for making that.
Here you go. Can you smell?
Yeah.
Studio smells.
Yes, I can actually spritz it right now. Why not?
Isn't that amazing? Don't you love that? That the fact that we are in different parts of the world and yet we can experience and smell scent at the same moment, and you will smell it differently to me. So it staggers me.
It's also such an elegant scent, and when I smelled it, it's just so you. It's so Jo. Which almost brings me to my next question. You have such a distinct fragrance philosophy that really, without even knowing that something is your creation, with Pomelo, when I smell it, I'm like, oh, this is Jo.
Yeah.
Or Jo by Jo
Thank
Loves.
you.
Oh, this is Jo. You just recognize it. How would you say that scent philosophy was formed, especially given that when you got started in the business, it was a world of big, bold fragrances that made a statement with a huge trail. And you were such an innovator in that space. You really broke that paradigm when you came into the maps.
What a wonderful thing to say. Thank you so much. When you smelt Pomelo, you think that you know that it's Jo. That is such a wonderful comment, and thank you. She'll treasure that. And Pomelo really is. She is the matriarch of everything. She is the beginning of a new chapter of my life, and I think I definitely created differently from that moment. Something in me had changed. I was braver, stronger. But Pomelo is so fragile, isn't it? You think the smell is going to disappear any minute. And then suddenly this wonderful big wood comes alive and holds the citrus notes in her arms and carries it. And it lingers and lingers. And the stories I could tell you about Pomelo, and just briefly, I'm just going to tell you the first beginning one, because it is, I think your listeners will really, really love this. So we were starting Jo Loves. We were really struggling because no one knew I'd left Jo Malone London. And there I was 5 years on, trying desperately it felt like I was wading through hot treacle, trying to get my name. And all I wanted to do, I wanted to create fragrance and build another global brand. That was always in my mind. And I'd created these fragrances, but nothing really resonated. So I went to Parrot Key, and through a lot of anxiety, a lot of soul searching, I first created Pomelo. And the perfumer that worked on it with me, it was just a single note at the time. Very, very brilliant man. And it was an accord. So it was one note, and I went, no, that's it. I just want more strong, deep notes in the base of it. And so I remember bringing the first bottle of Pomelo back. It was October time. It was really wet and horrible in London. And there was a friend of mine called Jane DeMuro. And at the time, she was the beauty buyer for Selfridges. So a big deal. And she said, word is you've started again. Can I come and see you? And I said, yeah. So she comes to my studio, which was in Sloane Street, just off Sloane Square, pouring with rain. She had a Burberry rain mac on, and she sits down and says, tell me about your story, da-da-da-da-da. And she said, Selfridges would love to have you back because the world misses Jo and her fragrances. And I said, well, I tell you what, let's think about it and I'll come back to you tomorrow. I said, but in the meantime, stand up and put your raincoat on. She did. And I covered that raincoat in Pomelo, every inch, the collar, the sleeves, everything. And I said, if more than 4 people don't stop you in the next 24 hours, there's no point me coming back. She called me 9 o'clock the next morning. She said, it's a done deal. Everybody, she said, my raincoat just smells of Pomelo. And to this day, it's still her fragrance. And sometimes things we create you have to really believe, and you have to really allow the anxiety, the creativity, the love, the tears to pour into what we create. And when you do that, it creates integrity. And when we talk about classic fragrances, that's what being classic is all about. And Pomelo is, her voice has been heard time and time and time and time and time again in so many different forms. But it's always full of truth, integrity, and a second chance for me.
I know in asking the next question, I'm asking you to pick a favorite child. But do you have fragrance notes that you just reach back out for all the time that are your go-tos, like you really, really love working? Or is it more so for you, well, I want to try something else new and different this time around?
Well, I wear 4 or 5 notes every day, all day. I'm always playing with fragrance. And it's probably always the one I'm working on that has my attention, because I'm trying to find the holes and the bits in it. But I think this one, so this is Jo by Jo Loves, is my fragrance I created for me. And it is a meze of grapefruits. So I love grapefruit. I love citrus, clean, but this has got peppery wood. It's so powerful. And it was a fragrance I created just for myself. Just even spraying it now, I'm thinking of all the wonderful moments. So I'm telling you my life story through the power of grapefruit. And I never intended on selling it. I was just going to keep it as mine, and I would make 10, 20 bottles, give them to people I really loved. And the more people used it, the more people wanted to buy it. And I just thought, you know what, it's quite spoiled, me just holding on to something for me. I can do that with thousands of other notes. And so we released it, and I wanted it to go into a red bottle to just signify something, passion and love and energy and active. Red for me means get up and go. And that's number one in the Far East for us now. So all the way through the Far East, through China, Korea, Jo by Jo Loves is the one that they love more than anything. Pomelo and Jo by Jo Loves are like best friends. They're happy, very happy living together.
I have a little quote here from the book. If you don't mind, I will read it. There is something magical about beginnings, about the challenges that come with the territory not yet conquered, about being the underdog. I'd rather stand at the beginning of something looking up rather than a summit looking down. I love this quote from the book. I think it's a really beautiful segue into, Jo Loves as a brand, right? Because you have certainly had incredible success in the fragrance world, and you had the the spirit, the strength to say, I want to do it all over again. I'm ready. And also, you were also coming out of a very difficult period of your life. You battled cancer, you won. And to come back and say, I'm ready, I think I'm sure that took a lot from you. So can you take us back to that moment in time when you felt like you were ready to come back in a big, meaningful way, and tell us the story of how Jo Loves came to be?
I think the reason I called it Jo Loves is I love fragrance and fragrance loves me. It's a love affair that will last all my life. And it has given me direction. It's given me the most amazing adventures creating. But after going through chemo, I was one of the first women to take it in a very different way. So I had chemotherapy every 5 days. And during that year, I didn't tell anyone this, but I'd lost my sense of smell. And I thought, what have you done? And the saddest part of the whole thing, a month into I had a 5-year lockout, my sense of smell came back one morning, and I woke up and I could smell everything. And I'd taken myself out of a position. And in those 5 years, Mariya, I felt so sad. And so I just felt there's only one thing I can do brilliantly in the world. And I'd stopped myself from doing it. It was crazy. So 5 years was long and hard. And the minute it was up, I knew that if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. And I'd fought so hard for my life to live it. And now when I look back, I'm just about to be 60 this year. I am the happiest I have ever been in my life. I'm living adventures that I never could have dreamed of. And if I hadn't started again, I don't know where I'd be. I really don't. And maybe I'd be standing behind a counter in Selfridges and Harrods and selling someone else's fragrance. I know that whatever I did, I would have had to have been close to fragrance because it makes me a whole person. But I'm so glad I started again. And I'm so glad it was tough. Because if I had just stepped right back into the shoes that I'd stepped out of, it wouldn't prove who I really was. I really know in my heart now that I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm not just a one-hit wonder. I can do it again. And not that I want to, I could do it a third time. I know that capacity within me to recreate and reinvent and tell stories of my life through the power of fragrance. And that Jo Loves has taught me so much about that. And Jo Loves has really taught me who Jo really is as a woman.
Wow. Jo, you've always had such a high bar for yourself. And I know we've already touched on the story of Pomelo. And I know that through reading your book, there was a little bit of that fear of, can I do it again? And, can I reach my own high bar? So when you started creating Pomelo, how did you know it was the one? Now, obviously, as a consumer smelling it, right? I'm like, I know this is the one. This is such an amazing scent. But like, how did you know? And what was that process for you?
I do set myself a high bar, but I think that's a good thing. You know what? If we attain everything in life that's within easy reach, you'll never discover that part, the jewel in yourself. You'll never find that part. And it's not about succeeding, and it's not about failing. It's about getting up and trying, because you're going to fail. I'm afraid, you want to hit that bar. You're going to fail from time to time. Dust yourself off, pick yourself up, off you go again. And people learn to respect that. And success won't be far down the road. It'll be somewhere, but you can't demand it, and you can't just snap your fingers and think because you've been successful before that you have the right for it again. How did I know Pomelo? I think that's just something in my gut. I love that gut instinct. I have a compass in life that is inspiration, innovation, integrity, instinct, and ignition. Those are 5 I's. And I create fragrances with that compass. I employ CEOs with that compass. I open stores with that compass. And it has served me really well. And the gut instinct is, sometimes in life we have forgotten how important gut. When something doesn't feel quite right, it normally isn't.
Yeah.
And when something really feels spot on, and it's a bit like this little paintbrush here, when I first presented this idea to my marketing team and PR team at the time, I thought it was the most genius idea of painting yourself with fragrance. And they all looked at one another and said, it's so gimmicky. No one will get it. No one even really cares. I don't think it'll work. And they kind of, I was the founder, the creator of something. And I walked off, picked up my paintbrush, and it didn't look like that at the time. It was a little drawing and a concept. I went to the ladies' room and I sat in the toilet and I cried. I didn't cry because they made me cry. I cried out of the sheer frustration. And then I walked back in, dried my eyes, and I said, I don't really care what all of you think. We're doing it. Do you know that product, the belief, that high bar that I created myself, and people trying to knock you down? Because sometimes your dreams and your aspirations and the things that you believe in, people are so far behind you, they cannot see how it possibly, and yet this little paintbrush was the golden ticket around the world. This is what opened markets for us like Korea, China. We've just come back from South Africa. We're heading to the Far East, Philippines, Thailand, all of those. Why? Because the world does want to paint themselves with fragrance. I was right. If I had been wrong, I would have had to take that on the chin. But I would rather be wrong and try than sit there and just appease everyone round a table because they don't have the vision. And that's where my job is so important. I have the vision. I could see the end goal, and I can see in 10 years where this paintbrush can go. It's in my head. I know what I want to do with it. And sometimes I do still sit with people and they don't get it. They just can't see the long-term thing, but that's okay. And I think as I've got older, perspective has really helped me. And it's like, Jo, just sometimes you scare out of people. And sometimes I do, because I'm moving so quickly and I'm so fervent in where I'm going. And I don't want someone to take me off that path. And that's, I think, often where I'm the loner, and sometimes success and creativity can be a very, very lonely world for a while. And I've known both success with people and I've known loneliness with creativity and success.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Yeah, because if you, as a visionary, you're so many steps ahead of everybody else that what, may feel gimmicky to some, that's the future, like in your heart of hearts, and I've tried the paintbrush product and it is such a beautiful application. It is decadent. It is truly, I feel like an artist and I am not an artist.
Well, you are.
Just to put it out there.
You are an
I guess
artist.
I am now.
Your body is the canvas. You've got the paintbrush in your hand. You have the ability to. And so what we do is we do classes all the way around the world. And do you know what makes me so super happy? When we have children. So we just had 2 students come in doing work experience with us. The school has asked whether they can come and do a week's work. They were such a joy. What did they love? The paintbrush. The paintbrush. Why? Because they could see creativity and no constraints. It was no longer just about just spraying. We will always use bottles of fragrance and spray our bodies, but being able to paint with fragrance and not invade the space kind of around you, and it just has unlocked creativity and imagination. And some of the things I want to do with the next generation of the paintbrush is really exciting.
Wonderful. Jo, I want to talk about the packaging for Jo Loves. I know that one took some time to get right. At some point, it was a struggle. I would love, for you to share the story of the packaging and the red dot as well.
So the packaging in the beginning, there was it was the good, the bad, and the ugly in the beginning. And when I first created Jo Loves, I was trying to be so different from Jo Malone London, I forgot who I was. And it's actually such a good lesson when people are building brands. You know what? You have to, your packaging is your best outfit. If you were going to go to the Oscars, what would you wear? That's how you have to package your product. And it was like this awful reddy brown with a black, it was just horrendous. And I'd ordered 40,000 boxes. And I looked at it and I just couldn't bear it. And in the book, you can see pictures of it as well. It was so predictable. And I knew at some point that I would have to go back and recreate who I was. And so I started, and all I could think about was a plain white canvas. And that's kind of my personality in a way. It's not that there's nothing interesting going on. It's just that a white canvas has so many possibilities. You could paint a beautiful sea and sky, or you could paint marigolds or whatever. So I knew I had to start with that white canvas. I love being a British creator. I really feel proud of that, flying my flag for my country around the world. And so I knew the Union Jack had to come into the paper. But what was my Nike swoosh? What was my Apple? What was my icon? What was the thing that people could take one glance at and they would know it was me? And I was sitting one day just at my desk and I was about to go to Shanghai in China on a trade mission. And someone had sent me a bottle of red nail varnish called Shanghai Red. And I was sitting there with all these labels looking in front of me with Jo Loves, just whites and black, quite dull, and it had no emotion. And I took a pencil and I just dropped it into the nail varnish and I put one drop on each of the labels and I looked and there it was my red dot. Because I'm dyslexic, all the way through Jo Loves, whenever I've signed something off, I stick a red dot and I sign it. And so the red dot was almost like my creative fingerprint that says, I've created this, I approve it, it's ready to come to you with love. So when you see these little red dots and you see them all over the world, you'll know that my creativity is not far behind.
I love this. The stamp of approval from Jo. Perhaps can we smell mango Thai lime together? I would love to hear the story of creation for this fragrance, what you think makes it special and why you love it so much.
So this one is so different and unique. So it was created partly in Thailand. I was at a wedding of a great friend of mine, and it was a beautiful Indian wedding right on the water. And Indian weddings go on for 7-8 days. They go on and on and on. And it was absolutely magical. So we stayed for 10 days in Thailand, in Phuket, and we had this beautiful villa, and we had 2 amazing women that cooked for us called Oi and King. And every day when my son would swim, we were in the Barclay Brothers villa, and it has a navy black pool that you swim in. So Josh at the time was 6, and Gary would swim every day up and down. And then as they got out of the water, Oi and King would have shaved frozen mango carpaccio and grated lime over the top, and the smell. And it would make my son smile. And I thought, that is such a beautiful moment to capture. But that's all it was. It was just a moment. A few months later, I was sitting in New York City in the Four Seasons, and I was sitting at the bar. And I love sitting at a bar. If you see me with a glass of wine, I'm not lonely. I'm watching people and life. And I watched the bartender take vodka, and he made a Cosmo. Then he did a dirty martini. Then he did a sea breeze. And suddenly, Oi and King and the mango came back to me, and it's like, that's it. I'm going to create the most incredible mango note, and I'm going to do a shot of Thai lime over the top. And in fact, mango, I did a trilogy. They're triplets. I did mango with oud, mango with nectar, and mango with Thai lime. But this one is so unique, isn't it?
It is.
And do you know something? I love this. My son is a fencer. He's an épée fencer, and his coach and my son, whenever they have a competition, this is the fragrance. And I can smell mango and Thai lime on the piste. And I always know that number 1 position is just round the corner. So yeah, mango and Thai lime is very sporty. It's very masculine, and yet it has this wonderful cologne-y lime to it, and almost a spice and a wood, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But also the sweetness from the mango, which brings everything together.
And I love the color. Look, so beautiful.
It is a beautiful color. It feels very, I don't know, herbaceous in the best possible way.
We've just launched with our amenities all the way around the world, and we have taken our favorite fragrances, but we go into the hotel, we take over the spa, and we create spa treatments, and we also do all the restaurant menu. So we take all our ingredients, and we've just created a mango and Thai lime cocktail, which is to die for, along with beautiful little mango mousse and lime macaroons. See, there's more to me than just smell.
Yeah, clearly. It sounds as fantastic as the tapas concept in the retail setting for fragrance.
I'd love to create a mango and Thai lime ice cream. I think that would be incredible. Maybe I will.
It smells like it would be incredible. It smells delicious. I would eat it for sure. Let's get into the white rose and lemon leaves. I love that smell. And you're also, you do florals like nobody else. So I would love for you to tell us the story of that fragrance.
So this is so special, and this is really close to my heart because it's been a big part of my journey in Dubai as well, being the Brit. So I was honoured by the Great Campaign to become an ambassador, and we were, as a group of us, there were like film directors, there were fashion houses. There were a whole group of us in the creative fields that went together and visited countries to tell people about the creativity of Great Britain. This is going back a few years. And we were heading to Shanghai. And it was where everyone was excited. And we were all asked to create something that depicted our country. And so all the perfumers, Roger Dove did something amazing, did a nightclub. Azzy Glacier did something incredible. So there's lots of Lynn Harris, and we were all perfumers together. And I decided to create the Union Jack. And what would the Union Jack smell of? And it would be white roses. So this one is the white Norma Jean rose, because they were in the Queen's garden. I visited Buckingham Palace many times, and there's a beautiful rose garden. They were in my wedding bouquet. My son always used to bring me white roses on a Friday night for dinner, and they would sit on the dining table. And the lemon leaves come all the way through this fragrance. They plait all the way through, and they give that sharpness. Life is not always the smell of roses. Sometimes bitter and things happen that make us cry and make us sad, but the overall feel of sweet and citrus together and sharpness can often be that really sweet spot. And I've used freesia in here to bring that sort of blossom, but again, it's sitting on this wonderful, strong bed of wood, which gives it its strength. But in Dubai just recently, this is the fragrance in the King's coronation that I scented the British consulate when we celebrated King Charles. And it goes to every wedding that I know. Everybody wants this as their wedding fragrance. And I've scented churches with this. I've scented concert halls with white rose and lemon leaves. It's just so adaptable. It can go into a room or onto your body, and it just makes us feel like celebration is around the corner.
I love this. It's very delicate but memorable.
It's long-lasting as well. It's almost as though she's singing on an operatic note and holding it for such a long time.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that analogy. And then the last one that we're going to smell together is the number 42, the Flower Shop.
This is my memory of the flower shop. So the young 16-year-old girl. So it's green crushed leaves. And if you smell it and you close your eyes, what color do you see?
White and blue.
White and blue. And tell me tell me what piece of music you hear.
Oh my God, what piece of music? Jazz?
Oh, and what are you drinking in the glass that you're sitting there? So you've got some jazz music, you've got this beautiful white and blue dress on, you're smelling this. What are you drinking in your glass?
Okay, sparkling water with a slice of lime.
You're so good. So mine would be Vivaldi. The color I see here is like this wonderful mottled green with a gold plate, and I would be drinking a glass of Gavi with crushed ice in it, with a slice of lemon. So not far from each other. But it's this. This is about the dreams of the young woman that believed that as the florist, could she really make it to the top? Have you ever seen that movie Joy, where the woman creates the mop for QVC? That's my That's my moment, the joy moment of remembering who you are, where you came from, the opportunities you were given in order, but the sense of pride. So that has the smell of lilies through it, white blossom, green leaves, foliage, kind of really beautiful foliage, and that is one of the best-selling fragrances across the world.
It's very addictive in the best possible way. All right, so let's do the scent reading. Jo, I know you have started doing the scent readings. I would love to get a reading from you.
Yes. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, so you and I haven't discussed this. I need one story of your life in one sentence. I will then recreate that story for you in under 5 notes.
Okay. I was sitting at an open restaurant in the Agafay Desert, which is located near Marrakesh, Morocco, with my laptop open, working on the next thing for Scentbird. And I look at the horizon. I could see the horizon really clearly. And that's when I thought, wow, this is freedom. This is what freedom looks like. Creating in the desert.
Oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. So I just need to ask you a few questions.
Yeah, please.
Although you've made it very, 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 very visual. In the desert. Blue skies? Beautiful blue skies?
Yes.
What were you wearing at the time?
Long white dress.
Okay. And just thinking, if there was a piece of music to be playing in the background, what would it have been? Or was there music playing in the background?
There probably was, but something like tribal, actually, because
So
the camels were
beat
not
of a
that
drum.
far away. Like I could see the camels from where I was sitting.
So
there's that
I sit and I
very
create in the
native
desert.
feel.
So I would start off with cobalt patchouli, which is all about blue skies and new beginnings. I would follow with some orange blossom. So, but not orange blossom as in a floral, orange blossom as in the petit grain, the bitterness of it, because orange blossom gives you everything she has, from her twig to her leaf to her flower, in order for her species to survive. She would give you everything, the last breath in her body, in order to see the next generation continue. I would take something like a charcoaled vetiver oud, often you can smell these beautiful woods burning in the distance in the Middle East. And I create in the desert. So I go to the desert and I do create. So I know that's that wonderful, dry, sandalwoody, cedarwoody. So I take a really beautiful wood note and take that in. I would take something like a bergamot or a cinnamon lime, and just take the skin and almost as though you steamed the lime and the cinnamon, and I would take the residue from that and inject it in as a cologne. It's funny, I'm seeing a black iris. I don't know why, but black iris do grow in the Middle East, and it has this wonderful soporific. What is it when you're dreaming and you go into your dreams and you're unbelievably creative? What's that word? So anyway, that word, that's what I'm thinking as well. So that is how I would recreate. And I'm seeing the color terracotta as well, this wonderful auburny sunset as the sun goes down, because the desert changes color. So probably a beautiful terracotta rose petal as well.
Wow, I love that. And I love that we share the, that love for creating in the desert. I never thought desert was so fertile, actually, for creation. I've always kind of thought that, okay, maybe by the ocean somewhere, when you look into the water, maybe that's when the creativity arrives, which actually was your story for Pomelo, right? And the Turks and Caicos. But the desert just has something else. That feminine energy that you would never have thought.
It changes though, doesn't it? So I've watched the sunrise over the desert in a hot air balloon. And I've watched the colors change. And we had a beautiful hawk with us who was training, and the hawk, and because I love animals, and the hawk was right by the side of me, and I was just able to stroke his back and watch the sunrise, and as the desert changes color. And that's why I went to live there, is to find inspiration. And I found it by the water, I found it in the desert, and who knows where else I'll find it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jo. One last question that I have for you today is, if you had a chance to go back in time and meet the little Jo, perhaps still struggling, and you could give her one piece of advice that would propel her into where you are today, what would you tell her?
Don't worry about the teacher that told you were lazy and stupid. You're not. You are one of the most. You will change the world, but don't be in such a hurry to get there. Enjoy the adventure, but enjoy the journey.
Wow, what a beautiful way to close this. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being with us today.
What a great interview. And I hope the people that listen to this will be inspired and go off and build and create too.
Yeah, I know they will, because you're such an inspirational speaker and creator. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.